This look through the prism may just be seen through a haze of hay fever. It seems that the itching, sneezing, sniffling, congestion, and other problems sometimes associated with allergies are simply not enough. A new study indicates that it is a variable that correlates positively with bullying. To take a look at the relationship between bullying and allergies, we are joined by Eyal Shemesh, an associate professor of pediatrics and psychiatry at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Welcome, Dr. Shemesh.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
When we speak of allergies, we're talking about an entire universe of possibilities, from cats to pollen, wheat to peanuts, not to mention a large range of severity from the simply annoying to quite deadly. But in your study, you chose to focus particularly on food allergies. What drew you to that set?
The reason we focused on food allergy is twofold. One is a practical reason, and that is we have a specific program that was set up 2 years ago. It's called the Empower program at the Jaffe Food Allergy Institute here at Mount Sinai. And it specifically addresses the emotional needs of children with food allergy. One of the ideas was, and this was really brought up by the head of the institute, Dr. Scott Seisherer, was to look at bullying as one construct that can be an issue there. So the first reason is pragmatic in that we had the program, and these are the patients that we were supposed to take care of. The second reason is that food allergy is, in my view, even more insidious, if you will, than other types of allergy, in that it really is not apparent. And children with food allergy look and behave and should really live exactly the same way any other person does, with one caveat, and that is that they can't eat the allergen or the food that is implicated in the allergic reaction.
And that was one of my questions. A food allergy is relatively invisible. So why are these children potentially targeted?
So first of all, I was surprised too. I mean, it's not as though we knew what we're going to find. The only other study that looked at it was actually, again, it's Dr. Seisherer and Dr. Lieberman, who surveys parents of children with food allergy, but not the children themselves. And the parents indicated that this could be going on. But other than that, we had nothing to go on except, again, our hunch. And so to begin with, I'm going to tell you why I think it is, but it's not as though this is clear and obvious. If it was obvious, maybe we didn't need to study it in the first place. I think that the answer could be because food allergy nowadays is something that kids do know about. So the first approximation, other kids do know that the child has food allergy. And the second thing is that it can be easily exploited. Unfortunately, it is something that does affect the food allergic child's life, although it's hidden, and it can be easily exploited by somebody who is a bully or who bullies other kids. And I think that we know that from other research, that any disadvantage you could think of will be exploited. That's almost the definition of bullying, and this is a disadvantage.
And so let's operationally define bullying in this case. Are we talking about one incident? Are we talking about a repeated series of incidents? Is it a range of verbal? Is it physical? What kind of bullying are we talking about?
So this is an excellent question, and let's just start by saying that there is no one definition of bullying that the field agrees on, which is, to me, a big problem in research, and that is why it took us about a half a year to even design this study, because we had to make decisions, and there's not one definitions that you can just go to a shelf and take it from there. And this is also the reason that the numbers that we report about prevalence it's very hard to compare these to other studies. The definition of bullying has also significantly evolved in the last 5 to 10 years. It used to be that bullying was considered to be only something that is repetitive. In fact, I think that the earlier definitions also require that it will be repetitive and done by the same person. And more recently, the legal definitions actually started to be more inclusive and change this definition to include even one act.
Do you think that's because of the internet, because of social media, where you can have one incident of bullying that gets viewed 10,000 times?
This is one reason. I think the other reason is that this is actually a testable question. You could actually see whether a one incident bullying affects somebody or not. And we started to realize that A, it does affect, even if it's one instance, and B, we don't want to wait until the second and the third instances, which is why, again, the legislature here is actually ahead of the research, because from the legal standpoint, how you define it really does have implications about resources and when do schools start to handle it and so on. I think this is the reason that the definition has evolved, which we had to make this decision for our study. And we decided not to make the decision, but to let the results speak for themselves. So we did not define bullying as either one incident or repetitive. We just asked how frequently it was with a few options. And then we looked at the data for repetitive and not repetitive. And what we saw was that there was a definite association with reduced quality of life for repetitive bullying as compared with one incident with no bullying, but there also was reduced quality of life with one incident or very few incidents of bullying as compared with no incidents at all. So our results do lend some support to the notion that even one shot deal is or one incident can affect a child adversely. It's not too hard to imagine either that even one time, if you're a food allergic, you know you can really die or develop a nasty reaction from if you eat a peanut or whatever it is that you're allergic to, and somebody comes to you and says, I'm going to shove this peanut into your mouth. Even if it happens only once, I can imagine how in some cases this could lead to ongoing anxiety.
And not to mention the reaction to that and what it provokes from the peer group could add layers of complexity to that as well.
Exactly. So I think that our result lent some support to the notion that even one instance is not good.
Now, I do have to wonder, though, that if you're having these operational problems in defining and comparing groups, is your study really saying that subjects with a food allergy are more likely to be bullied? Can you differentiate that from the general population or from genders, races, different age groups?
We used questions that are used by others, and you could look at studies that use definitions that are similar to ours. If there was a little difference between the percentage that we found and the percentage that others have found, then I would say absolutely you can't say whether this is more or less. But there was a large difference, because if you look at the studies of bullying, then you will find that they range from 17 to, I think, 35%. We found about 45.4%. So it's more than even the largest number that was reported for normative samples.
And you had a fairly substantial N. You've had a fairly healthy number of children that you looked at, right?
Yeah, 251, which is considered a relatively large sample, especially of children with a specific health care need.
Did you compare the impact of foodborne allergies to hay fever or airborne allergies or other more visible allergies? Is it the allergy itself?
I did not have a control group, so all of our patients had food allergy. They may also have had other types of allergies, but for sure they had food allergy. So I can't tell you that there was a control group and this is what happens here and this is what happens there. I can tell you that this number is eerily almost, is entirely consistent with the bullying percentage that's reported for children with disabilities, and I'm talking about visible disabilities. So there was a large study in the same journal, Pediatrics, that found that about 42% are bullied of children with special health care needs. And our number came almost exactly at that ballpark.
You've been studying food allergies in children for a while, and you've been looking at them on a behavioral level. Is there a behavioral difference in children who have food allergies?
We don't think so. I think that what is true is that they probably are a little more anxious than other kids, and that is not just explainable and normal, but it's actually helpful. And this is true for anybody who needs to maintain a heightened level of awareness, if you will, of their environment. It's normal for them to be a little more anxious. It's good for them to be a little more anxious. I would be more anxious as a doctor if I see somebody who has a food allergy and entirely is not nervous about it at all. Because if they're not nervous about it, then they will not do what they need to do to avoid it.
And as you said, that level of anxiety in some circumstances are adaptive, although it could possibly be a trigger that bullies might pick up on. So tell me about what we might be able to do about it. Tell me a little bit more about Empower. I'm assuming that might help a child.
The program was started because we thought that we can help. And we do help, from targeted consultations to working with schools. But let me also describe a finding in the study that can give a clue as to what should be done, and that is that we found that when the parents were not aware of the bullying about 50% of the time, but when they were aware, the child's quality of life was better. So when you took children who were bullied and you compared the quality of life of those in which the parent knew about the bullying and those in which the parent did not know, those cases where the parents knew did better. Their quality of life was better. So right there you see one intervention that I think is indicated and is not controversial, and that is we need to increase the awareness of the people around the child. We believe that when a case of bullying is identified, the victim is not the problem. And so I would not recommend counseling for victims of bullying unless they also have a psychiatric issue or a mental health issue, but not for the bullying itself. The bullying itself is a problem of the system. It's that clear. It's not about talking to the victim and saying, disregard that bully. This is not what we think is right. On the other hand, I also would like to mention that the bullies should not be entirely vilified. There was even one study that showed that a third of children who reported being bullied also were bullying other kids in other instances. So it's not the case that we have a class of victims and a small class of perpetrators who are really demons. I think in most of the time, these are other kids who just need to be redirected. And so you need supervision. You need an adult who can redirect it. You need to teach the other kids that this is not done, this is never tolerated, and to move on rather than start to focus on the bully as the place of all evil.
Looking through the prism at the specter of bullying, and more importantly, looking through the crystal at how important it is for others to study and be aware of what's going on in their child's lives. I'm Andrew Hiller for the Voice of Russia, and we've been joined by Eyal Shemesh, an associate professor of pediatrics and psychiatry at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. Thank you so much for your time and for the advice.
Thank you very much. All the best.